Okay, hi everyone. I think we have enough people in the room and we'll just let people come join us when they're ready. Hello everyone. Good evening from Vietnam. Good morning to our friends in Canada, and a warm welcome to those joining us from other parts of the world. My name is Mara, Executive Director of CanCham Vietnam, and I'm very, very excited to welcome you to today's Can Connect webinar, Vietnam Economic and Business Outlook H1 2025. It's wonderful to see so many familiar names and also new friends in the room. So thank you all for making time to join us. So please be informed that this session is being recorded as we speak. And if you have any questions, we do have a Q&A section at the end of everyone's presentations. So if you could please hold on your questions until the end. And at any time, if you don't want to forget what your question was, please feel free to just enter it in the chat box. All right, so today we'll be diving into some timely updates on Vietnam's economic performance in the first half of 2025, with insights on trade, FDI, real estate, finance, and practical business cases. We're lucky to have a fantastic lineup of expert speakers who will bring these themes to life. So we'll get started, and I'm very happy to introduce everyone to our first keynote speaker, Mr. Dan Martin, International Business Advisor at Dezan Shira and Associates. As part of the firm's North American desk, Dan supports Canadian and U.S. businesses while advising global companies on Vietnam's regulatory landscape. With experience in the U.S., Vietnam, and China, Dan brings practical strategies for foreign investors across industries from manufacturing to services. Dan will kick us off with an overview of Vietnam's H1 2025 economic and regulatory update. Dan, over to you. Sorry, Dan, you're just on mute right now. If you could unmute the mic.
There we go. Okay, sorry about
There
that.
you go. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, so as I was just saying, if I haven't met you yet, as Mara said, my name is Dan Martin. I'm an international business advisor, and I'm working with Des Shira and Associates. And I'm based here in Hanoi, but we also have offices in Ho Chi Minh City and Da Nang as well. Our firm, very quickly, we specialize in helping foreign investors set up, stay compliant, and scale here in Vietnam and also across the region. And absolute pleasure to be here with all of you this morning, evening, wherever you are. And thank you a lot to CanCham for having all of us. All right, so we've only got 10 minutes and so much ground to cover. So without further ado, it is clearly a very turbulent moment worldwide. Washington has tariffs back on. China is struggling with overcapacity, and Europe, to be frank, is barely growing at all. The US is frankly and loudly marching to its own drum as well, which is complicated things. And yet, Vietnam is proving to be pretty resilient up to this point so far. So the economy in the first half of the year, it grew about 7.5%, and this is more than double what we saw globally. So, and interestingly enough, that's the fastest start since 2010. So that's a major statement in what is now a slow growth world. So growth isn't merely high as well. It's also relatively broad. So if you look at services, industry, and construction, they all grew around 8% or so. And interestingly enough, services now officially surpass industry in Vietnam's economy, accounting for 43% of GDP. So this is quiet, but a really major structural shift for an economy that was long defined by the factory floor. Now for trade, first half trade turnover, it hit around $430 billion, and this is up 16% year on year. So electronics, as is traditionally the case, are the engine, of course, but agriculture also is big, adding around 34 billion. However, I think we need a dose of reality here. There was a 28% spike in exports to the US, and that grabbed lots of headlines and excitement. But to be frank, in my view, that was merely a short-term sugar rush. So firms, as you may know, were simply front-loading orders to beat the new tariffs. So to be honest, this is probably a bit of a temporary bump as opposed to a long-lasting shift. On a brighter note, though, there's Canada. So thanks to the CPTPP, or the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, trade has jumped around 120%, making Vietnam Canada's top ASEAN partner. Let's not kid ourselves, though. Canada's absolute share, it's modest compared to the US, 150 billion, or China with 200 billion. But the tariff-free access is locked in, so we can expect more growth. And in this environment of chaos, certainty is a big edge for Canada and Vietnam, for that matter. Let's talk about tourism. So by June, Vietnam had already welcomed around 10 million international visitors. So to put that into perspective, that's almost the entire total for all of 2022. And by the end of August of this year, arrivals hit around 14 million. So this is 22% higher than the same period last year. And on this trajectory, Vietnam will beat the pre-pandemic record of 18 million, which was in 2019. And the driver of all this is Chinese tourists are back. In fact, you may have read Vietnam has now overtaken Thailand in Chinese arrivals, which is a major shift in the regional tourism map. Next, we have manufacturing, of course. Manufacturing still anchors the economy. So in the first half of 2025, output in processing and manufacturing grew around 10% and contributed for about 2.5 percentage points to GDP growth. And it's keeping the sector at around a quarter of the economy. So Sweden's Sira, it's putting another billion into polyester recycling hub, and it's turning waste into new textile raw material. And by 2029, it's set to produce 250,000 tons a year, placing Vietnam right smack in the center of greener global textile supply chains. So this is a big story from this year. Now let's look at domestic demand, which is also flexing its muscle. So private consumption, it grew nearly 8%. And this is because Vietnam's middle class, now over 20 million, is spending very aggressively on many, many different things. Yet, to be frank, not everything is solid at this point. The property market, for example, which we'll get into a bit later, it remains pretty fragile. Developers are often short on capital, and smaller businesses are under strain. So in fact, many firms have been suspending operations, showing the high level of stress, especially on smaller businesses. But overall, the total count of new and also reactivated firms is climbing. So this is good news overall. Now it's to a topic some of you might be here for today. In April, Washington rolled out Liberation Day, which is sweeping tariffs hitting surplus countries and some not surplus countries. So as you may remember, Vietnam initially faced a painful 46% rate. Hanoi was able to negotiate it down to 20% for most goods and 40% for suspected transshipment. The rules are still shifting and enforcement is murky. But the immediate effect that I got to before was this short-term sugar rush. So U.S. exports surged 30% in the first half of the year. The bounce is beginning to fade a bit, though, so we'll still have to wait and see. But orders are already beginning to slow. And the World Bank, for example, expects growth to ease in the second half of the year. For Washington, the core concern here is transshipment, which is Chinese goods relabeled as Vietnamese goods to dodge tariffs. But even the definition is pretty slippery, which makes things very confusing. So if a container just passes through Vietnam untouched, that's clearly illegal. But if there's some processing or minor assembly before it shifts out, is that real production or transshipment? Washington hasn't really set the lines very clearly, and that makes risk much higher. But for multinationals, the safe bet is obvious, and it's build genuine capacity here in Vietnam or risk being caught in the big red, white, and blue net. Ironically, though, good news is the pressure could be to Vietnam's advantage. So to clear the hurdle, companies may be forced to invest deeper in factories and suppliers here. So this is good news overall. The story splits when you look at the North America market, though. So the U.S. is still the biggest market, but the 20% tariff will bite as the year advances. Canada is a counter narrative, though. So under the CPTPP, tariffs are essentially released. Trade hit nearly $15 billion last year. So Canada-Vietnam trade is still looking pretty peachy in comparison to what might be happening with U.S.-Vietnam trade. Now for FDI. So in the first half of the year, Vietnam pulled in about $21.5 billion in new FDI commitments. And this is a third higher than last year, so there's growth here. But the breakdown is a bit more complicated. So new approvals slipped. Instead, reinvestment by existing firms more than doubled. Portfolio purchases also jumped 80 or 70%. So newcomers are cautious, but the companies that are already here in Vietnam are aggressively scaling up. And honestly, they're increasingly opting to buy rather than start from scratch. And this isn't just paper promises. So dispersed capital hit about 12 billion, and this is a 5-year high. So on to the next part. Vietnam 2025, it's been driven by some fundamental high impact reform. So I think the most immediate one that many companies on this call might be feeling is Decree 219 on work permits. So previously there was a 2-step process, right? You'd have to go and justify the need for bringing a foreign worker, and also you'd have to go and apply for the work permit. So this is now a single combined application, which helps with timing. We have a bit more flexibility now too. So for example, no work permit is needed for short term, up to 90 days assignments. We have wider exemptions for digital and science, and the new rules allow one work permit to cover multiple provinces. So for multinationals, this means greater staff mobility. Next up, we have taxes. Corporate income tax overhaul. It was the first in over a decade. This clearly brings foreign digital platforms into the tax net, while also simultaneously going and offering new incentives for things like R&D, green innovation. I think the logic here is clear, and it's to tax digital activity fairly, but also reward modernization. VAT rules were also amended back in July. So exporters now face tighter requirements for the 0% rate, and domestic firms must also adhere to stricter invoicing standards. Now, does this raise compliance costs? Yes, it does, absolutely. But it also goes and boosts transparency. I think that's the main point. We also have the amended enterprise law, which sharpened governance here in Vietnam. So we have things like mandatory beneficial owner disclosures, tougher board duties, and also stronger anti-money laundering benchmarks. I think clearly these reforms demonstrate that the country is going and hardwiring its rules to go and meet the more complicated needs of this $450 billion economy that's becoming more and more deeply entrenched into global supply chains. And then we have this. Beyond the sectoral shifts, we've also had many institutional reforms that have grabbed a lot of headlines this year. So in June, for example, the National Assembly approved one of the biggest reorganizations here in Vietnam since Doi Moi. So provinces were cut from 63 to 34. Key ministries were merged. Crucially, also licensing powers for land, trade, and health, they've been shifted to provinces in some cases. The short term was definitely confusion, and I'm sure some of you felt it. But the aim in general was to go and create a leaner central government and also provinces with the scale to manage more effectively. Resolution 68 also sends a powerful signal. So for decades, official policy described the state sector as the backbone of the economy. Now, though, the private sector is called the most important force. So that's more than symbolism, because it essentially tells regulators and banks that entrepreneurs and also foreign investors are expected to be at the center of this growth story now. And just to wrap this up, I think just in time. So where does this leave us? The risks are without question real. I think we could all feel them here, right? We have fragile global demand. Who knows where that's going to go in the next few months? Tariffs that will weigh heavily on exports. Property sector is shaky, and also climate pressures, which we have to look forward to in the future. But also we have some real opportunities here, right? We have one of the fastest growth rates globally. We have solid FDI. We have key reforms finally tackling barriers that have been around for years. The next test, though, I think is the leap itself, which is basically, can Vietnam transition from a middle income to a high income nation? Can it go from a factory floor to an innovation hub? And honestly, I think only time will tell. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan, for setting the stage with that comprehensive outlook. And you packed a lot in 10 minutes, and so helpful in understanding the Vietnamese perspective and all the reforms and changes that are happening, and also how Vietnam is affected by or has opportunities in the global situation as well. And all right, we have a lot more people in the room. And now to continue, we'll turn to David Jackson, Principal and CEO of Avison Young, Vietnam and Cambodia. With nearly 20 years in commercial real estate and extensive experience across Southeast Asia since 2008, He leads the firm's strategy and operations while serving major clients with his expertise. Previously, David held senior leadership roles at Colliers Vietnam, including CEO and Deputy General Director. Today, David will share insights on Vietnam's real estate landscape and business infrastructure outlook, two areas that always generate a lot of interest in our community. So, David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As Dan said, good evening, good morning, and good wherever you are, afternoon, I guess. Before I continue, I just want to say, Dan, that for 10 minutes, that was really thorough, really deep, but you've taken away some of my slides. But no, very, very thorough. So let me just share with you what we have here. Hopefully people can see that. Just as a bit of background, so as Mara mentioned, I'm the principal of Avison Young. Actually, Avison Young are headquartered in Toronto, Canada. They are in 20 countries around the world and growing rapidly. They're one of the fastest international real estate consulting firms. And you know, it's a pleasure to, and thank you CanCham for organizing this. You can see the amount of people on the call and how popular Vietnam is and what people want to find out about it. So as Dan mentioned, there is a few flux. There is things that are changing here very quickly. People are looking at Vietnam. I can tell you the interest from tourism about being a destination, about the fact that business is next to China, as Dan mentioned, you know, and American and European money are looking to Asia to sort of pull them out of stagnation a little bit. So hopefully I'm going to talk a little bit on that and why Vietnam in the press in the region is calling it the rising star of Southeast Asia. So just for the next 10 minutes, if I can, there we go. So I'm just going to talk about just two markets mainly and touch a little bit of an overview on Vietnam. The two markets just requested because they're probably the most popular are just industrial at the moment and obviously office market, but happy to talk about any other questions that there might be. So just as a quick kind of look at the regions, quite frankly, Vietnam has three main regions that they call North, Central, and South. Not that complicated in terms of its design, but just for those that know a bit of background, because obviously anything that's property related, you know, it comes from the top down, it comes from the government. So here's, you know, one party, it's the Socialist Republic Party here, and they go through a nomination period of what they've just gone through. The reason this is quite good to start with is the fact that every 4 to 5 years they go through a nomination and election period. Now, obviously, FDI is growing year on year, but obviously, if people don't know who in the government to talk to, it kind of slows down depending on the election periods. And you'll see this around the world, but it's quite common here at the moment. But before I start coming out of the gate, I have to say that because of the policies and Vietnam and you know, Asia loves their paperwork, what I would say is that it doesn't matter what you read in the press, doesn't matter you know, if there's periods where people say boom and bust. The reality is that with 100 million people, Vietnam is the fourth fastest growing population in the world, and it quite frankly doesn't matter what property sector you're in, whether it be office, whether it be industrial, whether it be retail, there just quite frankly isn't enough to be built. You have an urbanization rate at the moment of 36%, moving to 50% in the next 10 years, next 5 years. So, which means that basically, you know, people need to build just to deal with that. And I'll talk about that. So it doesn't matter what sector you're in, it's over-demanded and undersupplied, and it takes too long for the approvals process, which the new government is actually trying to change at the moment and speed up the processes, as Dan mentioned. So just for us, in terms of the demographics of Vietnam as well, I mean, it is worth noting that is rising middle class here. There is a bigger demand for spending. Vietnamese spend money on food, beverage. They also education, schools, and one of the other ones is land and property, and so very much focused on that as part of the sort of the financial way that people grow in Vietnam. In fact, there was more high net worth individuals made last year in Vietnam than the rest of the world combined. Yeah, that just gives you that. So just looking at the two regions here, what we've got, obviously in the north, near Hanoi is the political capital. A lot of projects are still going on up there because basically that's where the people are investing. They're seeing development around the Chinese border for industrial. There's people look to kind of move away from China and develop contingency plan elsewhere. In the central region, basically Da Nang, they're looking at and there were plans underway to have a big sort of port going on there. They're trying to make Vietnam move away from the sort of heavy polluting industries into more tech industries. You can see this by Samsung coming over here and lots of other people. In fact, I'll talk about it in a bit, and Dan also mentioned it, to do with tax incentives and the government basically looking at helping companies with their tax and release tax to be beneficial. In some cases in Da Nang, I think you get 10 years tax-free if you're in semiconductors and electronics. And then obviously in the south, it's the sort of the economic heartland. Obviously it's the most place where FDI is happening. What I would say is, yes, as Dan mentions, FDI registered FDI is on the rise. Realized is happening, but it just basically means that there's more interest in people investing into Vietnam and doing stuff. What is interesting about Vietnam, though, is where is the FDI going? At the moment, FDI approvals and a lot of the projects that are moving forward and the money is actually coming around near Hanoi. They want to see Hanoi grow. As a rule of thumb in real estate, you can look at properties to buy or even to rent, and it's sort of 10-15% lower in Hanoi than in the south. Just obviously economically, population wise, there's more of a demand in the south because there's larger population, and it's more easier to do business because they've been doing it in the south longer and exporting it. But that is changing rapidly with all the approvals going on and the businesses going on at the moment. House prices are on the rise in Hanoi. So Hanoi and the development up there's a lot more roads, a lot more infrastructure, a lot more planning happening at the moment. So just in terms of industrial, so just the reason I put this here is that the landscape has changed a lot. Obviously, reshoring and diversification from China is happening. So for our business at the moment, we're doing a lot of work up in near Hanoi, in Bac Ninh and Quan Ninh, which is on the Chinese borders at the moment. A lot of planning, a lot of approvals happening there. But it's good to know that actually, in terms of where the IP, the properties have been located historically, is mainly in the south. These are because it's been going on longer there. They're more heavy polluting industries because of obviously farming and things like that that is happening here, and textiles. And the government is rezoned a lot of, as urbanization is happening and urban spread's happening, they're changing the polluting industries to move them outside, and they're moving in logistics, last stop shop factories where the urban population is happening. But in the south, historically, you're probably looking at about sort of just over a half of all of the industrial parks were based in the south. But again, that's changing. If you look at the northern, 111 operating IPs, probably in 5 years ago, that would have been about 70. So it just shows you how and where the FDI is going, where the money's going on there. So looking at the industrial stuff, and again, just focusing on a few things, but obviously, as Dan mentioned, there's a lot happening in Vietnam at the moment. So just having a look at obviously shifts in tariffs, shifts in political tensions means that people want to be near their consumer base. And when you have the fourth fastest growing population in the world, people think that they might want manufacturing to be here, especially when you're looking at it in the region as a logistic hub, which is basically what the government is trying to push Vietnam to. Due to its geographic location, but also, China plus one policies, TPP agreements, trade agreements, free trade agreements, and also the Silk Road, the Chinese road they're doing into different countries on the central landmass. So the government also, since 2015, which they changed the law on enterprise. Pre-2015, you needed to joint venture with a local partner. After that, law of enterprise said that you don't. Basically trying to make it easier for foreign money, foreign business to come here. In addition, also looking at development of infrastructure that needs tax incentives, processing of documents and setting up companies. They're trying to, at the moment, make it a lot easier just to get, so as it expands quickly, it needs the foreign money to come in here. What we're also seeing in a lot of industrial properties, and the same in other markets, is that when you have the buyers today, which are millennials and Generation Z, which is basically anybody born in 1980 to 2010, they're now the ones that are commanding the purchasing power around the world. And so most developers and people need to understand that and focus on that. What we see is the ESG, which and wellness and other certifications that are happening that might have been way down on the list before are now being moved up. If you want to buy a pair of trainers in the States, that get made in Vietnam, everything in the supply chain must be ESG compliant. In fact, Vietnam is developing something where they call EIPs, which are eco-industrial parks, where they're combining people in the same parks together that might have shared services, that might integrate each another. Infrastructure is a major thing. In Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, they have these ring roads being developed that are pulling different shops and centers out, increasing land prices in those, and making sure that actually as the city and the urban population grow, that the ability to transport and move things around basically becomes easier. Industrial logistics segments, as I mentioned, are the main focus here in Vietnam. Basically, everybody nowadays has a mobile phone. You need to stand outside an office just to see the sheer volume of grab and deliveries that happen here, on a daily basis. So, but it is changing industrial. Just in terms of the tax incentives, Dan spoke a little bit about these, but the long and short of it is there's been land changes in law. There's decree changes that are changing for the government to basically look at the corporate income tax stuff to make it easier, to make their exemption, to make it more appealing for companies to relocate here and business to relocate here. At the moment in industrial, depending on your company that you work from, the choice pretty much is Vietnam, Indonesia, or India. And then so anything that can make the shift for Vietnam that has a growing population to make sure that tax is there, it's more transparent, is happening. So the long and short of it is there's lots of decree law. It's worth noting that it is decree law here. It is not law of precedent or case history law, which basically means that the government issues a decree and then it gets interpreted by the various ministries, or districts or wards in certain ways. So one of the things that most people are investing here, and one of legally, is to really understand what the decree is, because some people will look at it differently, or it takes a while to settle in. So having good consulting and good lawyers will help with that. So here's another one. This one, basically, Decree 31. The long and short of it, all these decrees that are happening at the moment are to basically make the procedures less complicated, easier to do, more transparent, more for foreign investors or for VQ that come to buy properties over here, to give them better rights in terms of what they want to do, to make sure that they're more secure in terms of their investment. So looking at the office market here, the simple fact is, as I said, it doesn't matter what market sector you're in, it is over-demanded and undersupplied. The office market here, if you look at it, 10 million people compared to 10 million in Bangkok, it's a third of the size in terms of the office market here, and it's 1/5 compared to Manila. So, and the rents are 2 times more, and in terms of what you would pay, which basically is very symptomatic of other industries, other markets here, other property markets. Basically, if you're looking at grade A, it's graded here. There is no international grade A sort of qualification, but what I would consider as a grade A office market, there's probably only 2 office buildings out of 10 million population, in terms of where, as opposed to, Hong Kong that might have 120. So there's a lot to build, a lot to do. In terms of the density here, people tend to cram people in the offices here. It is worth noting that in Vietnam, when you're dealing with property, we discuss in US dollars, the rent, but actually because of Decree 101 and Decree 91, the contracts are done in Vietnamese dong. Now, the landlords historically, they get, it was in US dollars. They don't want the US dollar VN dong depreciation. So it means that the contract terms here are a lot lower. So they're 2 years plus another 2 years, or 3 years or 3 years, as opposed to other markets where it might be 10, 15 years. Now, this basically equally moves on because people don't fit out their offices as well because they don't have any security of tenure. So again, government influencing, looking at how that forms into the market. So FDI-driven growth, again, there's a lot more businesses coming in here, multinational companies that want to be on the doorstep of Vietnam as it's growing. It is an exciting time to be here. When you're looking at the occupancy rates, they're all very high because basically it's after 3 years of COVID, change in nominations and elections, it means that there just simply isn't enough products being put into place at the moment. What we also see here, which is quite interesting, is that tenant sizes in Vietnam tend to be still fairly small compared to other markets. The average size of a tenancy previously was about 250 square meters, but now with sort of more co-working space and things coming on, there was recently a big deal transacting a lot higher, so it's moving up slowly, but it's taking its time. So just again, looking at green offices here, there is the popular one is a LEED here, which is the US Green Building Council, but a lot of the developers over here that are functioning in this market are based in Singapore. So there's other qualifications that they might have like EDGE, or there's other ones like BREEAM, which is a British one. But basically they realize now that when you have electricity prices going up at 8% every year, if you don't have a good building that can match up with this and have good qualifications, people don't want it. As the higher multinational people come in here, the better quality the buildings are demanded and what they need to be. Again, very different story, 5 to 10 years ago. So it's changed quite a lot. So business strategy. Well, look, as I mentioned, ESG is an inevitable trend. It is happening. Again, if you want to build stuff here, there are tax incentives from the government to build green properties. What they realize is that if you do have green properties here, when you do a valuation of the property, obviously these help in costs and sales. Another one here is high tech, ready built factories. Obviously, there's a lot of logistics happening here, cost savings, time efficiency. Vietnam is not the sort of paddy fields and conical hats from 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's becoming very tech savvy. In fact, if you look at your phone on the computer, games on your phone, 5 out of 10 of them have been built in Vietnam properly. Flappy Bird and things like this are all happening in tech. And Vietnamese are very tech savvy, very young population here that understand that. And the other thing is, look, as you've got urbanization happening, it's shifting to non-CBD areas. There are as the infrastructure gets better, the land prices go up and people buy in the surrounding districts and areas. And you have the rise of something called TOD at the moment, which is transit-orientated developments, which basically means that, new places growing up on new MTR lines and roads and infrastructure as they go. And that's shifting away from demand and property rather than as built urban areas. Even in residential property, people are going to these external areas outside the city because they want more land, more property for a cheaper price. So thank you very much. Very quick, very surface level. Hopefully that gives you an idea, open to questions later on. What I would say though is it's a very exciting time to invest in Vietnam. The new government is focused on FDI and foreign money coming in, and I welcome the opportunity to anyone to invest in Vietnam. It's a thoroughly wonderful place. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Thanks so much for giving us a better understanding of the real estate landscape and how recent changes affect businesses in Vietnam today. For those who have questions, if you have questions, please just enter them in the chat box. Can we get a copy of the presentations? Yes, after this webinar, you will receive an email with the slides that have been presented today. And once again, if you have questions for David, for Dan, please make sure you pop them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. Again, thank you, David, for a wonderful sharing from your end. And moving on, we're going to move on to Tyler. And Tyler will walk us through financial markets and capital flows, helping us understand where the money is moving and what it means for business decisions. And a quick introduction. Mr. Tyler Nguyen is the Director and Chief Market Strategist at Ho Chi Minh City Securities Corporation. He brings extensive Asia-Pacific experience. Before joining in 2024, he led Maybank IBG Vietnam's institutional equity sales team, earning recognition as Vietnam's best equity salesperson by Asia Money and Institutional Investor. Earlier, he managed multi-market investments at Etica Insurance and held roles in investment banking and private equity with Maybank. All right, take it away, Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara, and thank you, the organization committee, for having us here. Hi, everyone. So good morning and good evening to all of you. Glad to be here, and my slide will be a bit long for the 10 minutes. So a lot of the overlapping that I've seen Dan and also David has done. So we'll try to make it through very quickly, and also I'll probably try to skip a few of the slides that is a bit more on the technical side. So hopefully that we will have enough to cover into the 10 minutes. Just a bit on HSC. So we are actually the #1 brokerage firm in Vietnam. We're one of the oldest and also the leading in terms of the institutional investor advisory and services. And we also have a leading investment banking arm in Vietnam. And for HSC, we are thrived to and very proud to be the #1, the leading research house in Vietnam to advise the institutional investors. And we've been able to gain quite a lot of recognitions and awards throughout the years. So for today, we'll talk a bit on the equities market, but touch a bit on the economies and also the investment strategies, as well as we've seen the biggest ever reforms in Vietnam ever since the 1986. That even me myself as a Vietnamese born and raised here, been abroad a bit and then come back. We've never seen anything like this before. So hopefully we'll be able to share some lights and color to you. So a bit on Vietnam, snapshot. So the expectation of HSC or our research team in HSC for 2025, summarized in a few things. One, the tariff deal with the US, we think that is fair. The VN index, which is the stock market index in Vietnam, is slightly overbought, so might due for a technical retracement. But if you were to see the US market, right, it's also in a way overbought and overvalued. But it's a time for equity market. So obviously, things the financial asset prices might be higher than we usually see. In terms of the foreign selling, so we've been seeing a lot of the foreign selling and US dollar withdrawn from Vietnam, right? And we don't really see a lot of the wave of FDI coming into Vietnam as strong as we would have expected. But obviously some of that due to tariff. But we think that, the foreign selling and the FDI will be not as impactful, and the local flow is quite abundant because we are actually right now living in a cheap money era for Vietnam, especially the financial sector, financial market in Vietnam. In terms of the global outlook right now, it's getting clearer, right? It's not very rosy, but we're still thinking that it's much better and more clarity than we used to see. The recent massive reform, I have to really emphasize on the massive reforms. They should be priced in further, and you're probably going to see that reflecting in the GDP growth in 2025 and move on to 2026. With the government is expecting an all-time high up to 8.2 to 8.5% in the past 10 years, and we're aiming for a double-digit growth, of which I'm going to explain a bit later. In terms of the upside, for financial market, we're seeing, Vietnam is on the verge of being upgraded a lot, right? Financial market, we're looking at emerging market. So Vietnam is still a frontier market where capital flow is limited versus an emerging market like regional peers, even though the economy has actually gone up to a stage where we're already more mature than a frontier market can be. So obviously, we're looking at a major upgrade, not only on equities, but also on every other front, including the sovereign ratings, of which we are one notch below investment grade, and that would come within the next 5 years. We've seen public investment spending has been the highest ever in Vietnam so far, and the government has been willing to spend a lot. And you're probably going to see some of the results starting from the fourth quarter of this year, moving into 2026. We are seeing the broad-based economic recovery. So if you look at Vietnam economy, 98% of the corporates are actually SME, right? And so the stock market doesn't really represent the broad-based or the economy per se. But if you're looking at, the small and middle capitalizations, of the stock market in Vietnam, you'll see that actually it represents sort of like a broad-based income or earnings, and they're actually recovering from the second quarter. And according to HSC, we're expecting from third and fourth quarter, we'll be seeing a lot of the broad-based recovery on the earnings of the corporate, especially the small and medium enterprises. We're also going to be seeing a lot of the IPOs and the restart of the capital market in Vietnam due to the massive reform that I just mentioned. We've seen the biggest regulatory reforms in Vietnam ever. We are seeing political reforms ever, especially the political ideologies in the leaderships in Vietnam, and that is very pragmatic. And we think that, we've never seen that before. And in the modern Vietnamese history, right, we don't really see any sort of like a massive law revisions for capital market, regulatory reform in key sectors, in all real estate, energy, diplomatic efforts, etc. And we think that we're actually at the verge of, of a new era and very exciting time to move forward to. And again, like I mentioned, 2025 GDP will be strong. We've seen that. With the KPI that the government is actually giving to each and every individual provinces. And we're also seeing that, being reflected in the SOE, which is the state-owned enterprises, that are actually recording higher than usual revenue due to the push and very aggressive push from the government. FDI growth is not really a big spotlight right now, but it's expected to return. A combination with the internal factor of growth, and we'll be seeing, a lot of those growth coming in 2025 to 2026. So that is the expectation summary of what we are actually going to say. Now, moving on to, so what we believing is the politics is going to come first and economic comes second. So I was in the UK and was studying economics and politics, and I believe that politics comes first, and especially true for Southeast Asian nations such as Vietnam. What we're seeing, the executive summary, don't worry, I'll walk you through. Very simple. On the left-hand side, the column, there are 4 key reforms or ideology change in Vietnam, right? One is the anti-wastage efforts. So they are changing from, arrests, changing from, eliminating corruption to anti-wastage efforts, so improving procedure in the government efficiency focus. They are changing the way of diplomatic efforts. So they're doing a lot of engagement, broaden their friendships. So we are not going to be able to depend so much on the US market alone. As you may know, the US accounts for about a third of whatever the Vietnam economy is exporting overseas. So, the overly dependent on the US market is actually being addressed aggressively right now. Regulatory reform, again, is the largest ever in the modern history of Vietnam, spanning from land law, public investment law, electricity law, investment law, security laws, and so on and so forth. We also see the pro-growth government, where we are seeing a high target of GDP and very determination of various decree, including what Dan was saying in the resolution number 68 just now. The public investment has getting a meaningful boost. We're seeing a decision to uplift capital market, decree 245, and also the decision 2014. We at HSC was, in a way, struggling in how to combine all those initiatives within such a short period of time together to explain to international investors. And that has been a problem right now, right? This time the problem is, what else can we do? This round is, we are doing so much, right? How are we going to be able to put things together to a perspective? So in order to do that, right, we highlighted all the events and headlines and initiatives from the government and the impacts. 2-3 slides here. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. But once you get the slide, then you're probably going to see how they're doing and things going to get to make sense. So these are all from November 2024 all the way to right now, September 2025, and including the capital market. We've never seen such a high commitment from the top government officials, including the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, in terms of reforming and aiming Vietnam to uplift Vietnam capital market to the next level. And that has already been done by exactly decisions and also decree officially signed by the Deputy Prime Minister. And we've never seen that before. At least in the past 10 years, is always the State Security Commission, but now is actually you're talking about the top government officials doing that. If you were to talk about bamboo diplomacy, then you're talking about only Vietnam, China, and the US. But right now, what you're seeing is Vietnam is going to a 2.0 bamboo diplomacy, where Vietnam is actually focusing on the regional space, of which ASEAN is going to be the core, and then expanding to new places such as Australia, New Zealand, the Middle East for potential trade partnership to diversify from just one single focus, US market. If you look at the global business ties, and you're familiar with Vietnam, right? We don't usually see the party secretary general goes around shaking hands with the business community internationally and promoting Vietnam, and that is a big and huge change in the ideologies of the government. So they are very pro-growth, pro-business, that we have never seen anything like this before in the modern Vietnam history. In terms of the private sector focus, we also don't really see so much on the meetings with all the local corporates to address issues in terms of, the regulatory framework, in terms of projects, management, in terms of investment. And right now we are seeing that. We're also seeing, mentioning about local contents. We're seeing about, willingness and commitment in terms of, credit growth, investment, government invest in infrastructure investment, so on and so forth. And I think that is something to be focused, and the market has, in a way, not talked about this enough. Provincial merger, so I'll go through very quickly. So Dan has already mentioned, right? We've been going through a major change ever since the foundation of the country. And why they are doing that is because the larger the province, the easier and more ability for the local government to decide on projects. And what they did in tandem with, the reforms of merging all the provincials is to revise the investment law. And that's already been reflected in the numbers of public investment disbursement for the past 4 months, where you already see, projects are being actually executed a lot. So I'm not going to go through all these, but technically, public investment law, public-private partnership law, investment law, and electricity law, they are all very key, important milestones that Vietnam has been able to achieve. So in the fourth quarter of 2025 and onwards, you're probably going to see a lot more investment. And if you go outside, you see that Vietnam is actually the major, construction zone nowadays, in Ho Chi Minh and in Hanoi. And so these are just the provincial merger and also district level and ward level mergers that we are seeing in Vietnam. If you're comparing that, then we're something after the merger, right? Post-merger, we're something like Japan, which is similar in terms of the total area, population, and also similar in terms of number of province state and the average population per province as well. Now, moving on to the economy and equity market outlook. So there's a lot of these details, and I'm hoping that I'm doing okay with the timing. In terms of the economy, we are looking at Vietnam to be upgraded from emerging by FTSE. Capital market reform is very strong. We are one notch below investment grade in sovereign ratings. We are MSCI emerging upgrade again very soon within the next 5 years, increasing a much bigger inflows from foreign FDI. We're also seeing the market economy tied to upgrade by the US. It's going to be in the picture within the next 5 years. That's our expectation. And various other upgrades. We're seeing a trade tie upgrade, bilateral relationship of some of you have already know. FDI from tech giants also looking at Vietnam, and that story will come in 2026. So this table was a bit comprehensive, but what you actually technically see is that the numbers of the disbursed FDI has actually sort of come off during the tariff period a bit, and we're expecting that to move up very soon. In terms of PMI, we are actually negative in the negative zone during April up until June. But July and August, we're starting to see that picked up again. Still weak, but we are expecting that, a recovery going to come at the end of the year. One highlight I want to show you is the tourist growth and tourist arrival. So Vietnam right now is becoming like a mini Thailand. And tourism is going to be one of the major growth and the spotlight for the economy too. In terms of the disbursed investment, which is the fourth line from the top, we are also seeing very strong number ever since April 2025 up until now. Only August is slowing down because of the merging of the provincials, and we're expecting that in fourth quarter this number will continue to be very strong. In terms of the reason for the market or for the government to look at Vietnam as a double-digit numbers, then we did take Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, and most likely Malaysia as a case study. Then we're seeing that all of these nations, in order for them to move out of the middle income trap, they need to grow at a speed of at least almost 10% to even more. Therefore, with an aim of a double digit, it makes totally sense for Vietnam at this kind of stage to move further. Now, in order for them to do that, what we are seeing is that credit growth is going to be one of the major way for them to do. And quarterly credit growth has actually gone up, and the quarter GDP growth is also continue to move in tandem. It's slightly positive correlated. It's not entirely correlated, but at least what we are seeing that is happening in Vietnam. And we have a regression model of which we are calculating that in order for the economy to grow at 8.5% GDP, we're talking about something like a 20% credit growth for 2025. On the average, Vietnam can have about 15%. So for this year, we're expecting a very strong credit growth. And in 2026 and beyond, if the government continues to embrace the double-digit GDP growth, you're talking about at least 23 to 25% of credit growth. And that would be a lot of liquidity in the system. And you're probably going to see at least 2 to 3 years of very strong growth moving forward for Vietnam. Now, in the equity markets, 8 months, 25, we're seeing the VN index is actually outperforming everyone else. We're seeing liquidity is also doing quite well. Foreigners still continue to sell, so they are still bearish on the front. The EPS, which is the corporate earnings, actually continue to improve, like I mentioned just now. We see valuation is actually still quite okay. GDP growth is still okay, like Dan mentioned. The VND, right, is actually not doing so well. But we are hoping to see that is going to be stabilized towards the end of the year or first quarter of 2026, and there will be within about 5% of the depreciation allowed by the central bank of Vietnam. There's external factors that's going to be here, and domestic reform on all aspects that we will not be able to mention everything in such a short period of time. Market performance, Vietnam is the highest, and Vietnam is actually one of the highest sold by the foreign outflows versus the regional peers. In terms of the stock market, so a bit on the stock market, right, we are actually talking about halfway through a bull run. So Vietnam usually have about a bull run that is lasting for about 16 months to about 12 to 16 months. And right now we're about 4.5 months into a bull run. So we're still expecting something like that to happen. And also you were to look at the macro context evaluations, liquidity driver and so on, and other factors in 2025 versus every other bull run or positive period in Vietnam. We are seeing right now we are fundamentally more sound than every other period. Therefore, with this bull run, right, there's a lot more substance to why the stock market in Vietnam has continued to run like that. So in terms of the foreign ownership, right now we're also looking at the lowest ever. So this foreign flows interest might come back to Vietnam anytime soon. So this chart is showing what are we looking at, from now until 2026? And you can tell, right, everything is green. So most of the midterm catalysts are also there. And we are seeing that, more catalysts will be there. In terms of the VN index calculations, I'm probably going to skip this. But if we were to talk about major IPO deals, we're also seeing that there will be a very active IPO market in Vietnam in 2026. Many very interesting companies will be looking to list in Vietnam stock market as well. Now, the upgrade expectation, we're looking at FTSE in the next 6 to 12 months. We're looking at MSCI in 3 years. We're looking at the market economy title upgraded by the US in the next 3 years. Allocation increment from FTSE and MSCI. We're also looking at investment grade, which is very important. Investment grade by S&P, Fitch, and followed by Moody's in the next 5 years. And also within the next 5 years, Vietnam will become a consumerism economy. Where the income per capita averaging of over $5,000, then that would be something like the Indonesia economy about 5 to 7 years ago. Now, these are all these details on all those upgrades. So I'm probably gonna skip on that. So the sectors that we usually focus in Vietnam for the next period time to come are banks, consumer, real estate, residential. We see energy and utilities are going to be in the regulatory benefit fishery as well. And we also see the diversified financial is going to be in line too. And also obviously public investment related, right? So materials, construction contractors, they're also going to be very, benefited from the recent reforms. In terms of roads, right, we are looking at, companies that are going to benefit from the roads projects that are in Vietnam right now. We also do rails, right, and of which we've seen a lot of the domestic companies that's going to be beneficiaries of the rail reforms in Vietnam. Now, for Vietnam, right, there's a budget called the Vietnam National Expressway Development Plans. And in that, right, Vietnam is going to be spending about almost 90 billion US dollar. It's not really a lot to the US economy, for example, right? But for Vietnam economy, that is actually quite a lot, just only for roads. And we're expecting the total expressway is going to be quadruple by the end of 2050, of which, we're going to be double by 2030. So there's a lot of construction in this space. In terms of seaport development plan, there's also going to be a very big, throughput capacity increase from 1.14 to 1.42 to about 1.8 to 2.1 billion TPA. So that is something that we're going to see. And the estimated investment will be up to about 600 to 700 trillion Vietnam dong. That is also about 30 million US dollar. The Vietnam dongs essentially depreciated about 10%. So it sounds a bit lower, but actually it's supposed to be higher, in US dollar terms, just, last year. In terms of airports as well, so there's going to be a lot of airports and all the number estimated costs right now, but we're looking at something like the two major international transshipment hubs in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi will be there in vision of 2050. And by 2030, then there will be 275.9 million air transport passenger from only 100 million air transport passenger. So about almost triple the capacity that we're seeing right now, only in the next 5 years. Railway is also another area to look at because we are looking at the total investment estimated of about 65 million US dollar. Also, Vietnam has the capacity to spend because right now the debt over GDP is only about 35%, which is way below the threshold of about 50%. So we're talking about, a capacity and ability to borrow and spend more. And that is the reason why there's an aggressive investment plan moving forward for Vietnam. And that would conclude my presentation. I hope that I did okay with the timing. Please feel free to, send in any questions now or even later to follow up because I'm sure that, 10 minutes is quite a lot for us to cover everything. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tyler, for a very detailed update on the financial market in Vietnam and what to expect over the next year and what implications that has for businesses and investors in Vietnam. We really appreciate the detailed highlights of the new government initiatives. And that was a lot to unpack in the 10 minutes. Congrats. Well done. And
any follow-up questions, yes.
Yes, definitely. So before we move on to the Q&A section, we have one more speaker. So last but not the least, we bring it closer to the business community on the ground. I would like to introduce Ms. Tra Leth, Market Expansion Director at Source of Asia, where she oversees market approach, sales and trading, and M&A projects. With over 10 years in Vietnam and experience in both private and public consulting, she brings strong communication and management skills to help foreign clients expand successfully into Asian markets. Ms. Tra will share practical cases and stories from foreign companies doing business here in Vietnam. Ms. Tra, over to you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So do you hear me? So I'm the last one to present, and I think it's very, how to say, I have a chance to be lucky to be the last one because everything have been shared previously, and actually I cannot, how to say, agree more with what have been saying. So basically you have go through all the, how to say, good numbers, perspective, and I hope that after this webinar, CanCham will receive a lot of requests and also interest to come to Vietnam, etc. So basically, promise I will not go into the data, the figure anymore, but it's more about how to say the way and also the some experience on the ground experience that we work with foreign company when they comes to Vietnam. So basically, Source of Asia. We on the mission to support a foreigner company when they have a plan to comes to Vietnam and also to have a question about how to grow business in Vietnam, etc. We cover Vietnam market and we also do operation in ASEAN market because today one company, foreign company, when they have a look at expanding overseas, they will not probably look at only one market, but several ones to choose and to get best of the best. So basically, that is the reason why we do our work. That's the reason why we bring our services, such as I mentioned here, and we do not do it for fun. I mean, we enjoy doing it, but because we why we do it and differently. If I say differently, what make our work helpful? It is because we try to answer to and to accompany a new newcomer to the market with the very specific and also the needs that they may have. So basically, one company, when they look for expanding overseas, they have a lot of questions about how about the market. So basically, all the data, all the sharing that we have get so far is very, very positive and promising. But concretely, it is not only about data because, yeah, data everyone can get, everyone can, how to say, understand it. But from perspective, from planning to into operation, there can be a big gap. So in a very short presentation tonight, and also I believe that we are a little bit run out of time, I just want to share some cases, basically 2 cases that we have do with our North American companies, unfortunately not yet Canadian, but they are US company. The first one is Decorap. So basically, Decorap, who are they? They are leader in the packing solution for fresh cut flowers and potted plants. And what they want, what they looked at Vietnam and ASEAN market, they look for strengthen their supply chains in Southeast Asia, and also at the end of the day, they want to open manufacturing factories in Vietnam. So basically, yeah, they come with this kind of request, and it looks like simple because yes, you want to do this, you want to open that, but in reality, we need to help them to have a very in-depth, how to say, understanding of the market, the way that we can expect and the way we can do business in Vietnam and in the region. So what is our solution? What is the way that we work with them to comes to these intimate goals? So basically, first, they say that they want to because actually they produce in China, and they want to not get out of China, but have an alternative backup in Southeast Asia. But Southeast Asia means that it's very big, and I mean we can do everything with this, but at the same time we can do nothing if we don't know the market. So first, the first question is how to identify the potential suppliers in and which market to choose. So basically, we sit down with them and also to take note of everything that they share, and we have come up with a kind of SWOT analysis, and also all the factors that we need to understand in Southeast Asian market, and then to identify the best market for them. Second, once they find the reliable and compliant suppliers from the chosen market, the thing is for their needs to open a manufacturing things. Should they open from zero, meaning that they will build a new manufacturing facilities, or should they merge with a local partner, existing factories, or the second or the third option should be to buy out buy out completely. So basically for this, because if they want to build, to build a new factory, we can work with them on kind of industrial mapping to zap out to find out the best location, etc. But after such consideration, they come with an idea of buying an existing factory. So what we did, it is about doing a very, very comprehensive audit, factory audit, because a factory, a business in Vietnam or in Asia in general may not happen or may not appear as they look like. So basically, we spend a lot of audit days within in the factory, and also comes up with a very detailed audit report, and then to make sure that everything fit the checklist, and also in terms of compliance, also a lot of things to check. And then once we finalize with it, today, Decorabs have running their own factory in Long An. They are small. They are about 40, 50 people. They are not big, but again, the question is how to support them to find the right employers, because working with a very Vietnamese factory and then merging with a very American style management can be a gap. So that's required a lot of collaboration skills and enhancement to do so. Again, kind of leadership management, cross cultural aspect management is something that a new company can expect and need to think about it seriously when they come to Vietnam. So yes, nowadays they have a very reliable source of suppliers. They also have a good sourcing of materials and machinery, because when they work with in the factory, because of course there have been some machinery before, but now they need to invest a lot. So today they are fully operational, and we are very happy to see that the setup is well established, and they start to produce and to have an alternative option that they have done before with China. And the second case is a new US company. They are very small. They are natural fiber welding is they are in the natural textile and zero plastic materials, and basically they can supply to footwear, fashion, accessories, and automotive sector. So the thing is, they want to expand operation and really comply in terms of regulatory to reduce the cost and also ensure their market entry their operation locally. Yeah, so the same thing. This is not about the manufacturing side because they all import the product. But the thing is, when importing, and when working with local suppliers, local producer, manufacturer, and then to sell out from Vietnam, there's a lot of regulation compliance in terms of logistic and tax to be really be aware of. So basically, the team is only 3 persons. They don't decide to invest more because they think that 3 people can be enough. We respect their because we support them, but we cannot decide on their behalf. So we respect their strategy. But of course, with 3 people, you cannot expect a lot of things, and especially they don't have the legal and legal entity in Vietnam. So that's why the trading part, the fact that we the importing materials, do the production on site and sell out in Vietnam and in the region can be very tricky. So yes, our services is something that we can customize and tailor-made to their needs because we don't have this kind of request very frequently. Yes. So we manage first the recruitment to team up. Okay, they are the 3, but we team up with 2 more people. We do the warehousing because they don't have their own entity, so that's why they need to be hosted by a local company. Expatriate management also because they send someone from the US to lead the team. And also, the more tricky and the most complicated part is about the sourcing and logistics support. And basically, when doing that, we comes up with a lot of legal setup, legal advice, legal compliance. That finally we are now we are on a regular operation, so everything is on track now. But to be honest, this is something that is very, very complicated, and because it comes up with the revenue, it comes up with the cash flow, it comes up with a lot of tax regulation, FDI, etc. So the question was very, very tricky, but finally we are very happy to support them in the work. So just very quick example of the two cases, and we can have a lot of ambitious project, but again we need to comply and very strict on the local regulation, local way of doing business, and that's why I just want to come up with some kind of awareness and also recommendation. I'm sure that when you are a business that look for exporting or doing business overseas, you are all aware of this. But again, it is shared before. Vietnam, ASEAN, it is not as simple as it can look like. So yes, first regulation, be aware of this. Build a very good relationship. You can, if you cannot build yourself because of your team size, because of everything, you must rely on local relation or connection, and them will build the good local relationship on your behalf. And also, the talent game here is we need to take advantage of the very good, skilled, and tech savvy, whatever you want, for the population from Vietnam and from the ASEAN, and it can be a very best bonus for you. yes, the question of supply chains matters a lot, and for this you need to be active with all kind of FTA, all kinds of suppliers and audit partner to make sure that you can take the best advantage of this. And again, when you do business in Vietnam or somewhere out of your zone, you need to adapt also to the local practices. And just in Vietnam, we all know that doing business in the north, the south, or in central Vietnam is not the same. So just don't assume. We need to be very carefully and also to work like the local people work. So yeah, very quickly, I stop my presentation here. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Cha, for the insightful and successful case studies and for sharing those with us from Source of Asia and highlighting the opportunities and challenges for market entry in Vietnam and the reality of it. And I think we'll move on to the Q&A. We are a little bit tight on time now, but while I pull out the questions that were submitted through registration, I'd like to just quickly ask everyone in the room if you could join us, if you could please show your faces. And we'd love to take a picture of everyone in the room because we know we have participants from all over the place. So the team will take a quick picture of everyone now. So big smiles. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm not going to delay any further. We're going to go straight into the questions. And so some of you did submit some questions through registration, and then we'll go through also the questions in the chat box. And you can always raise your hand as well if you have questions in the room. Okay. First question. How is Vietnam preparing for changes in global economy in the Trump era? How does changing demographics impact economy in the next 5 to 10 years? Ms. Cha, do you have anything to answer to that?
So I think it's a very ambitious question because we talk about the 5 to 10 year time frame, but actually tomorrow we don't know what happened and everything can be changed very quickly. So yes, we talk a lot about Trump because it's the latest, wave or change that we can encounter this year. But just to share with you, 2 weeks ago I was in US also, so it's not about the question about how Vietnamese do and need to prepare in terms of change that we can have with Trump. Even the American people are also very worried, and also they ask how they can do, because actually when talking about trade and FDI, it's both way, and it's not about one country, one market, or one product, etc. So basically, my advice, I mean, I cannot advise anyone, but based on what I can see, observe, and also my recommendation is more about how this is not before the traditional business can focus on one market, one product or category, and you sustain from this because you have repeated order, you have repeated opportunities, etc. But the business world today changed, and first you need to diversify your product, and also diversify your market to reduce the independence that they may change. Today we talk about Trump, but tomorrow if someone or Chinese government can change also their mind. European government can also impose their new way of doing business. So we cannot just wait for something happen and to adapt and then to submit or to rely on this and to make our change. We need to proactively identify our strength, and also this is not only about production or export. It is also about the supply chain. You need to diversify also your materials because today if from the production side you are dependent, and from the exporting side you are dependent. And I mean, how you can gain your market? So basically, you can do something differently and reduce the risk. And the risk, you are the one who can identify it and also to weight it. And basically, you can. This is not something smart to change everything, but you can do some kind of 20% of your production should change. So basically, you can still continue on your current business, but you have a new change to explore new things that you have not done before. So, so 10 or 5 or 10 years can be very, very long. But basically, if you don't prepare right from today, it would be very hard for you if one day it hits you.
Thank you, Cha. All right. Sorry, I'm not going to dig into all these questions now, but we'll connect everyone with all the speakers after this event. But next question, how to attract Canadian corporations and entrepreneurs to invest in and trade with Vietnam. Tyler, could I ask you to maybe get this one?
Sure. Thanks, Mara. So I think the question is quite broad as well. Probably, I think that's also a bit related to the previous questions. What I think is the government is actually doing in the slide, right, was mentioned something called the Bamboo Diplomacy 2.0. So in the first bamboo diplomacy, then the tilt is always either US or China without the focus of diversification. So right now, Canada, alongside with every other major market, except for the US, right, is actually being focused on and from the government level. So right now, what they're doing is establish a very good relationship with the other governments. So obviously, Vietnam and Canada, having a good relationship and eventually bilateral upgrades in that sense, and have a mutual commitments in terms of how much is the trade that are actually coming into Vietnam and vice versa, right? So there's always a two-way way, and then there will always gonna be the making regulatory framework more easier for businesses, even the small slightest, like such as visa application for expatriates in Vietnam has to be reformed, and it's actually been actively reformed quite a fair bit. That's applied to every other nation. So I was having conversation with the Malaysian business community as well, and they're also saying that bringing expatriates to Vietnam requires a lot of the paperwork, and that has to change a lot so that companies can operate better. Another point to note is the tax scheme, of which I think there's a lot that has been mentioned by David. But I think in terms of tax scheme, there are two things. One is on the financial industries. There's a financial center, both open up in Hanoi and Da Nang, and there will be a tax waiving, corporate tax waiving, and also the personal income tax waiver for expatriate and experts. So that can be applied to every other, sector as well. The sectors that, the Canadian economy is strong about, and they want to bring experts in, and the expert is more willing to move to Vietnam, not just because of the nice food and the beaches, but also because of, the good tax regime from the central government. So something to look forward to. Another point to note is actually not only the ease of doing business, the ease of the tax regime, but also, building like a more connectivity between the government and the businesses community. And they're already doing that. They've been going around and meeting business communities. And I think the engagement between the government and the businesses of Canadian business in Vietnam, right, has to be increased so that, the businesses can actually talk and voice out what is their concern and what they're hoping for. And I think the dialogue is very important. Luckily, they're doing it, and I hope that they will be doing even further with the leaders in Vietnam. And obviously, that political stability is what we're having right now. So yeah, again, those are the things that I think should be doing. We should be doing. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Okay, on to the next question. This one we'll give to David. How do you foresee the prospects for Vietnam in attracting foreign direct investment over the next 3 years, and which sectors are likely to emerge as the most attractive?
Okay, thanks very much, Mara. Just before I go on, just to touch on Trump a little bit, going back there, the Vietnamese, Tyler says it enough, the bamboo politics. In times of mayhem and chaos, Vietnamese are politically are very good at, opportunities and things like that. So I have to say, the current premier was one of the first to visit Trump before with all the trade going on, and also we now have under development in real estate a Trump golf course and a hotel underway in Ho Chi Minh City for the future as well. So I think the relationship is pretty good there, and I'm sure they're communicating and back channeling to great success. And that also, I guess that also comes into the question that you just asked about FDI and how does Vietnam improve that? Well, look, what I get asked a lot is, when is the time to invest into Vietnam? And what I would say, and hopefully it's clear from the presentations from Dan, Tyler, and everyone tonight, the time is now to invest into Vietnam and FDIs. There's so much change happening. The future is going to be bright for not just 3 years, but the next 10 to 15 years. It is only going one way. It remains strong, FDI, whether it be, registered or dispersed, it's improving year on year. Investor confidence is growing as the government's stabilizing. The government is correcting the ills of the past. It wasn't immune like the rest of the world with COVID. The whole world slowed down, tourist numbers dropped, interest rates went up. But what it has done is it's got control of its economy. It's making sure that, it's taking opportunities in new governments around the world. It's reaching out, which is something that it probably wouldn't have done 20 years ago. So it's really shifting. And honestly, the current To Lam, the current premier here, he in his speeches, he's talking about revolution. That certainly wouldn't, be a language that would be used in the last couple of governments. So, I think there's also a shift of focus. There's buying geographically, being next to China and the political tariffs with China. It's going to be successful because of its by being its neighbor. Then you have a huge, amazing demographics, as I mentioned. You've got 52% of the population here are in the golden age or working age, producing goods and money. So, and as Tyler mentioned in his presentation, it's basically being looked at around the world and upgraded in terms of from a sort of, a lower level cost manufacturing to high value sectors in terms of its grading, what it's doing. So I think it's focused, and the government is focused on the right things at the moment, and it's correcting the ills of the past. It's expediting its processes. It's moving away from heavy polluting clothing manufacturing to high tech and electronics. It's offering tax incentives for that. It's looking at renewable energy. It's got a green drive to make sure that their wind and solar panels are and investing here. It wants to be a innovation and tech hub, and it has the population and the young population that is tech savvy that are pushing that forward. You have Nvidia as coming over here. You have other people. FPT just sold a portion of their business, in terms of AI and things like that. Logistics, supply chain, food manufacturing, it's got all of it, ticks all the right boxes. It just needs to take time to deliver that. What the government needs to focus on here is infrastructure, and it's doing that in terms of roads, as you can see in Tyler's presentation as well. It's doing that on new airports. There's a huge one just coming to the south of us in Ho Chi Minh City here. Skilled workforce, looking at energy supply, things like that, how to cope with the expansion of the country as it opens up is probably what the government needs to look at. And it also looks at the regulatory framework and the tax framework. So as long as it stays the course, The demographics are pushing it forward. I don't think Vietnam's going to have a problem in 3 years, which is relatively a short time. In real estate, for example, we don't deal in 3 years. That's about how long it takes for planning. But I can guarantee you the government, because it's stabilized, needs to have positive stability, stable growth year on year. The people need to feel that life's getting better, and it's definitely doing that at the moment. So I think it's a great period to be here, for the future. I'm very positive about that, and hopefully, that comes across.
Thanks, David. Couldn't agree more. All right. So one more question from your perspective as FDI continues to flow into Vietnam. What is the private sector's biggest challenge in meeting rising international ESG and sustainability standards? I'll give this one to Dan.
Sure. So I think I got the easiest question of the bunch, for better or for worse. I would say the biggest challenges are pretty obvious. It's twofold, right? We have a skills gap and we also have a funding gap as well. So if you look at Vietnam's growth story, for decades, it was built on high volume and low cost, right? That worked very, very well, but the standard has completely shifted. So when we look at international investors and buyers today, they're not specifically looking for cheap or reliable production anymore. They're asking for things like ESG disclosures, governance expertise, verifiable net zero strategies, data as well. So it's a completely different playing field than what we were dealing with before. And most Vietnamese SMEs and a lot of foreign SMEs in Vietnam as well are just not equipped for what we're dealing with. So on the skill side, right, we have comparative lack of specialized talent who could do things like understand global reporting frameworks, carbon accounting, ESG data. And these are not skills that you pick up overnight. It'll take quite a long time. And then we have the obvious funding gap, right? So even if companies wanted to comply, many do not have the capital to go and invest in new tech. Or things like clean energy, ESG reporting systems. Margins are already thin for SMEs, and survival is often the priority, not investing in these things. So when we look at new rules coming from Europe and everywhere else coming into force, right, we have CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. We have supply chain due diligence laws. Local suppliers here, they risk being sidelined, unfortunately. All right, they can be accused of greenwashing. They could be cut out of contracts that they can't meet. And unfortunately, this is a kind of bad note to end it on. I think it puts us kind of at a two-speed economy. So the big, mostly foreign investment firms will have the resources and expertise to go and meet those standards. So I think we'll be better off than a lot of domestic SMEs, but the domestic private sector, especially SMEs, they risk being left behind. And that's pretty difficult for Vietnam because it creates a really strong structural divide right inside its own economy. The Vietnamese government knows this very, very well and is looking on upskilling and also increasing funding in order to get around this. It'll just take some time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan. So since we are out of time now, I'm going to ask one more question, and then the other questions we'll direct to the speakers and introduce you to them one-on-one so you guys can discuss that further. I think that's a better way to unpack some of this. So last question for this evening. I have a question for Tyler. What's the impact of importing market while Vietnam dong is dropping so much against USD and euros? Thank you.
Thanks, Meryl. I think the question is really on point because I think the major downside risk to the Vietnam market right now is actually exchange rate. And as you may know, the government has been able over the years net exporting overseas and build quite a much better foreign reserve in a way chest, right? To in a way spend on a situation like this. But however, that kind of foreign reserve is actually being depleted quite recently, quite a fair bit. And what we are seeing is that, there's not a lot of the methods, available for the central bank of Vietnam to be able to significantly change the depreciation of the Vietnam dongs against other international currency if the government still want to pursue growth. So obviously, there has to be eventually a depreciation every year of the Vietnamese dong against, let's say, the US dollar and every other currency, just because, Vietnam is an export economy and we are actually embracing growth. However, there shouldn't be a more than 5% of depreciation versus, let's say, the US dollar. That is not really 100% certified by the central bank, but it's the unspoken rule, right? And the government is very consistent about keeping a stable currency. So there will be moments during the year that there has to be up and down, especially at this kind of period when we're seeing like a higher for longer. In the US, where the interest rate is being kept very high and being cut way too slower than what we would have hoped for. So therefore, right, we're actually right at the bottom out of the period of the currency. We're thinking that there's still a bit of room for Vietnam dong to depreciate over the next 3 to 6 months, but hopefully with more cuts at the end of the year by the Fed, in the US, we're hoping to see some relief on that front, and then the currency in Vietnam will, in a way, make a way back. Right now, year to date, Vietnam dong depreciated about 3.5%. Year to date, and it's sort of like stabilizing right now. That is also the reason why you're seeing, sort of like a slowdown in FDI disbursement, of which we should have seen like a much bigger number, right, after the tariff relief in a way. But I think in this kind of environment, then we sort of want to probably going to advise investors to wait and see towards the end of the year. We are seeing a substantial reduction in terms of pressure on the Vietnam dong. But yet, I think the safest for an FDI to actually come into Vietnam would be something at the end of fourth quarter, where we are seeing stronger numbers in terms of economic performance in Vietnam. And also, people are actually seeing that is the bottom out of the Vietnam dong weakenings. So with that, right, it's like a spillover effects when everybody's sort of knowing that, the Vietnam dong doesn't depreciate anymore. Then people will start to transfer, even the local company will transfer money from the US, as a US dollar, coming back and buy Vietnam dong. So that is when the currency will strengthen back. So that is my take. So towards the end of the year, and you shouldn't be worried, and maybe a 5% every year is something that you may want to factor in when you make a decision to invest in Vietnam, because I don't think the government will let anything more than 5% per year. But obviously, we're hoping for something less than that. But 5% is the absolute maximum.
Great. Thanks so much, Tyler. And once again, thank you to all our speakers, Dan, David, Tyler, and Tra, for your valuable insights. I think everyone learned a lot from today's session. And everyone in the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. And, at CanCham, we're so proud to host these Can Connect webinars. It's a great platform for us to exchange knowledge and also build our community wherever you are. We're just so happy that you can join us. And this is just one of the many exciting programs we have lined up this year. So stay tuned and join us again. We'll be talking about Vietnam. We'll be talking about Canada. Lots of things to share in those areas. So speaking of which, we'd love to also see you come to our upcoming Canadian Thanksgiving dinner on October 11th at the Deck in Tao Tien. And this is going to be a special edition of the Canadian Thanksgiving. This is an annual event that we do hold. If you're in Vietnam, we hope that you can join us. This year, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. So we're hoping that you can join the community in celebrating that with us. And next up, we also have the No Power Business Bootcamp Retreat. This is to celebrate Vietnamese Women's Day, but we're partnering with Howie and Women in Business to bring together a full day retreat, really just celebrating the Vietnamese women's values and spirit that we all love, and how that translates to, successful businesses. And really, it's a day for exchange, for reflection, for inspiration. So we hope that some of you can join us. Last but not the least, we also have our Consumer Trends Seminar. This is in collaboration with the Consulate General of Canada. And this will be on October 29th, where you can find out the trends to watch out for 2026 from some amazing speakers as well. And once again, thank you so much for joining us. We did run a little bit over time, but I think it was a very helpful and very fruitful sharing and session from everyone. So once again, thank you again to our speakers, Dan, David, Tyler, and Cha. If you would like to connect with CanCham, you have our QR codes there. But after this webinar, you'll receive an email with our slides that were shared, the presentations that were shared today, along with the contact information for all of the speakers as well, to give you an opportunity to connect with them. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good one.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.